technically 3 minutes till 10, and I could just sit here awkwardly for the next 3 minutes, but I see a lot of people who are kind of looking like they're ready to go. I won't talk about anything of substance until 10 o'clock. But anyway, my name is Dr. Popp. I'm a clinical pharmacist with Harris Health System. I work in ambulatory care over at Alding Health Center. And y'all know where Alding Health Center is? Yeah, I thought it was Maps. Google Maps. Anyway, I work up here, up here in Alding, basically. So pretty far. I actually live in Humboldt, so it's close to me, far from you. But over there, I see a lot of patients that do primary diabetes management. So it's pretty much diabetes in and out every day. So I really enjoy diabetes. I'm happy to get the chance to talk to you about diabetes today. I guess a little bit more about me, not because it matters, but it's fun, right? So I grew up in Waxahachie, just south of Dallas, Waxahachie, that old town, which is nice because it's like coast to the big city that can do big city things, but not so close that like you feel like you're trapped. Then I went to school in Austin, so I'm a Longhorn. Longhorns. That is where some person is. And then I did my residency. I won't lie, my wife's account. And then I did my residency in San Antonio. Did Pike School of Pharmacy. There is a 2-year pharmacotherapy residency. It was kind of like a P4 year on steroids because I kept rotating at different institutions for 2 years, but as a resident instead of as a student. And then I graduated, got married, and came over to Houston. So I've only lived in Houston since 2019, so I haven't been here for anything like super crazy except for COVID. No like Harveys or anything I've like lived through here. But I really enjoyed living here so far. I like I think the diversity of Houston, I think, is what really attracts me. Because in Dallas, you feel like it's like the same thing for like miles and miles and miles. And Austin is too expensive. San Antonio is very sleepy. But Houston,
what did you say?
San Antonio is very sleepy.
Oh, sleepy.
Sleepy. It's kind of sleepy.
Yeah. See, she's here now.
Yeah, right. It's just a little bit. But it's okay. I lived there for 2 years. Now it's only 2, right? But it's nice. I mean, it is nice, right? It's calm. It's peaceful. But sleepy, I think is the term. Anyhow, I really like how Houston is a little bit something different and new around every corner. Every little pocket of Houston has its own vibe, its own culture, its own feel. So that's a little bit about me. But anyhow, it is now 10 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and get started on talking about insulin dosing and titration. So I grew up, I had a grandfather. Go for it.
You forgot to press the recording button.
Oh, thanks. Supposed to be there. Got this. Oh, now it's looks a little different. Let me see if I can change this. Is that still big enough? Mm-hmm. Okay, now I need to hit the button. All right, that's dramatic.
Action.
There we go. Cool. Apparently, hopefully this works. If not, well, good thing I showed up today. I grew up, I had a great grandfather who had diabetes. He had kind of the old school insulin where it's stuck in the fridge and pull it out and mix one, mix the other, inject it. I always thought it was kind of scary as a kid growing up. Any of y'all have friends or family who see you use insulin when you were younger? Right? When you're young, you're like, oh, like, why are you having to inject that? It's kind of weird. It's something that can kind of seem overwhelming when you're not super familiar with it, when you haven't worked with it. And let's be real, everything in pharmacy is kind of overwhelming when you haven't had a chance to work with it yet. Or P2s, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So you're coming around the corner as far as like filling a P. Finally, maybe getting the hang of some things, but there's still a lot more. So I'm going to try to take this slow and make sure it's as approachable and understandable as I can. I heard y'all are a great interactive group, so please ask questions as we go. If you feel like I'm talking too fast, just like hold up your hands and like, okay, I'll slow down. And we'll go from there. Our learning objectives is to, an error occurred with the recording, okay. Well, I got a minute, I got the introduction. Okay, we'll try this again.
Does it record each slide?
It records each one, yeah, and then it's exported. So by the end of this presentation, you should be able to describe the clinical properties of insulin, to visualize the action of insulin over time, compare and contrast specific insulin medications, and finally, do some insulin revision based on the patient's glucose levels. Now I can't figure out how to make myself go to the next one. Yeah, that is. I guess I'll just.
It's okay.
Alrighty. We'll get through this. So pathophysiology overview. Remember that, why is it that people get diabetes? What causes diabetes?
An insulin issue.
Insulin issue, right? So you don't make enough insulin because your beta cells wear out. Now, the reason beta cells wear out is because they get overworked. The reason beta cells get overworked is because we cause them to work too hard. Good. Physical inactivity, right? And poor diet, right? So over consuming sugar, so
Not just sugar, carbohydrates.
not just sugar, carbohydrates. Although the biggest culprits are sugar. You're right. Carbs in the sense that like starches, potatoes, rice, tortillas, breads, those can certainly contribute, sugar polymers. But overconsumption can lead to your beta cells working too hard and getting tired over time. In addition, if you are obese or if you're not obese but you're not moving a lot, your beta cells are going to have to work harder because there's more insulin resistance, right? So basically, as your beta cells overwork, eventually, initially they secrete more insulin. You're like, yeah, they're secreting more, but they start getting tired. They start slowing down. Like when you're running that laps on the track, you kind of keep getting slower and slower and slower because you're getting tired, right? And as a result, insulin secretion will decrease over time. As insulin secretion decreases, eventually you're going to start having sugar problems, right? You're not going to be able to control the sugar levels anymore. And what's important to note is that, look down here. You can see this is the entire time frame in which someone has type 2 diabetes. But early on in diagnosis, they still have a decent amount of beta cell mass, a decent amount of insulin secretion. As that time disease goes on, though, insulin secretion continues to decrease, and eventually that's why somebody who maybe doesn't need insulin 10 years ago, maybe now they need insulin. And maybe in another 5 years they'll need more insulin because the beta cells are constantly kind of wearing out. And this is, once again, a result of diet and exercise. So people who make those changes, hey, they start eating healthier, they start moving, they're going to go a lot longer without needing insulin, or they'll need less insulin compared to somebody who maybe doesn't make those changes. What questions do you have on that? Cool. This whole recording thing is kind of not working, so
Don't worry, it's okay.
No.
It's okay.
like I said, you're here, so you'll benefit. Remember that insulin is a hormone of abundance, so it promotes the uptake of glucose for storage and for lipid and protein production. If you have no insulin, then you'll have no glucose uptake. So instead of going to the cells where it belongs, it just hangs out in the blood. And as long as it hangs out in the blood, it's going to cause havoc because high sugar levels can be kind of caustic, right? It can attach to certain things like the backs of your eyes, cause damage, can damage the nephrons of the kidney, cause kidney disease, etc. Initially when we started using insulin almost 100 years ago, it was just human insulin, regular insulin. But with medicinal chemistry and such, they figured out how they can change different side chains on insulins. Some modifications can make insulins work much faster. Those are our rapid acting or short acting insulins. Some modifications make insulin work a lot slower, which are our newer, longer lasting insulins. I'm not going to get into the medical chemistry of it. I don't know that one myself, but the theory is just kind of what's important. And that's how you get a series of different insulin analogs that all have different types of activities, right? From aspart or lispro, which are relatively short-acting, high peaks, regular and NPH, which are intermediate, and then detamir or glargine, which are both long-acting. This is going to be kind of a review from yesterday. That's okay. Insulins are injectable products, traditionally stored in vials in which you would pull liquid out of the vial with your syringe, and then the dose is injected under the skin subcutaneously. You can inject generally around the belly. You can also do the thighs or the back of the arms. I don't know how you inject it back here, but if you can, great. This is kind of old school vials and syringes. Newer formulations, a lot of patients prefer the insulin pens. I know Dr. Brewster brought these yesterday. Basically, they have all the units in them. You don't have to pull anything up. You just dial the dose and inject. I can show you videos on this, or you can watch them at home. And so you have these slides. So by all means, if you want to watch these videos, you can to remind yourself on how to inject these counseling points. It's really hard to find a good short video because sometimes you pick it up and they're like 15 minutes long. They're like, "I'm Dave. I'm going to tell you how to use insulin." I'm like, I don't need that. I just need to know how to do it. So these are nice, like 2 or 3 minute videos, which are easy to use. How do you know if you're giving enough insulin? You also have access to your slides, so it shouldn't be too hard to answer. Okay, A1C, and the patient's sugar levels, right? So we know that when we give a patient insulin, it goes to lower the sugar levels. So we can check their glucose logs, see how well it's lowering the sugars. We can check their A1C, see if the A1C is improving. We can also see if these signs of high sugars start to improve, such as polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia. A lot of this stuff sounds like, oh yeah, they say the patients get all this. They really do get all this. I mean, patients will say, I have to wake up all throughout the night to use the restroom. I'm super thirsty all the time and I can't stop eating. Especially when the sugars are in the 200s and the 300s. And those symptoms should resolve with successful insulin use. But too much of a good thing is not a good thing always, right? I know that if I gave everybody 1,000 units of insulin, they would no longer have high sugars. But what would happen? They would probably die because their sugars would go too low, right? So with insulin, we're treading this needle of we want the sugars lower, but not too low. And that's what makes the drug a little bit tricky. You gotta give enough, but not too much. And so the signs of low sugar include dizziness, shakiness or tremors, sweating, palpitations, or a general sinking feeling. I feel like I get it at 10 o'clock every morning, because I'm like in the middle of the day, breakfast was 4 hours ago, I'm like, oh shoot, I need to take a break, gotta get a snack, right? And that can happen more easily with our patients with diabetes. What questions do you have so far? Cool. When you're dispensing or prescribing insulin, patient counseling points, if they're new to insulin, making sure they can measure the dose and inject it properly, knowing how to identify and respond to hypoglycemia. So here I say Rule 15. Anybody familiar with the Rule 15 for low sugars?
No.
Dr. Walter, my resident, shaking her head. What's the Rule 15, Dr. Walter?
Rule of 15 is when you are feeling signs and symptoms of hypoglycemia, checking your blood sugar. If it is low, confirmed, then eating 15 grams of carbohydrates, which can be easily done with half a soda, a glass of orange juice, 4 to 6 hard candies, waiting 15 minutes, and then rechecking to make sure the blood sugar has gone back into normal range.
All right. If you didn't hear that in the back, do you hear that in the back? All right, cool. Then you're good. But yeah, basically 15 grams of carb, wait 15 minutes, recheck. What does 15 grams of carbs look like? It is not a soda. It may be like a little bit of soda, like a quarter cup of soda or a half cup of soda, but it's not a Mountain Dew soda, right? It can be a little bit of hard candy, but it's not a bag of candy, right? So it can be helpful to kind of point out to patients what is appropriate versus not appropriate. And it can be challenging because you take that 15 grams and it's going to take a few minutes for it to be absorbed. And you're going to feel bad until it gets absorbed, right? So we just have to let them know that it's okay if they got to wait the 15 minutes. And the other important thing for patients to know is that, hey, what if I have questions? What if I need help? The last thing I want is a patient being stuck at home not knowing what to do because they don't have a place to reach out. So I try to give them a way to contact me, to contact the clinic. I tell them to go to the pharmacy, because there's people out there who can help them, but the patient needs to know who those people are. As far as dispensing or prescribing, always be sure to double check the dose, then check it again. It's easy, especially with a medication that, 10 units may be right for one patient, 100 units may be right for another patient, right? So without a dosing variation, you want to make sure you're not making mistakes. So if you're dispensing insulin, the dose you dispense should probably be similar to the last dose the patient received, right? If they're getting 50 units last week and suddenly the prescription says 150 units, that's weird. Last week it was 50 units. Why is it now 150, right? Whereas if it's 50 and now 60, hey, that makes sense, right? They're just making a small investment. But it's better, usually you give it a little bit too little than too much. And insulin is really, we have to remember, it's one of the most dangerous drugs. There's what they call the four most dangerous drugs in the hospital, which is heparin, opioids, and potassium, because if you mess up the dose, the patient can die. Insulin's right there along with them. So we have to be very, if you see one of these four drugs, insulin being one of them, it's a time to say, okay, let me pause, let me make sure I'm doing everything right, because if I make a mistake here, something bad can happen. And that one's really picking up. They were having fun. Some medications can increase risk of low sugars, especially the secretagogues, like sulfonylureas, the glipizide, the lepride, those can be notorious, as well as pramlintide. I've never seen pramlintide used, but it's one of those things where it's in the textbook, and I'll just throw it here. Medications that can interfere with the detection of hypoglycemia also matter. So these are primarily your beta blockers. A lot of patients who have diabetes will be on a beta blocker, and beta blockers will keep you from getting the fast heart rate and some of the shakiness that you'll get whenever you have low sugars. Patients will still sweat, but they may not have some of the other physical symptoms, so they have to be aware of that. And clonidine can also have a similar effect. Other drug interactions, some medications can also cause hyperglycemia, most common of which would be the atypical antipsychotics or corticosteroids. I have a few patients who they just have steroid-induced diabetes because they have Alzheimer's, they have rheumatoid arthritis, something else. They're taking steroids for it, and it just causes their sugars to go up, and then I had to use insulin, which is, I'm glad, you gotta do what you gotta do to treat one disease, and sometimes it can, unfortunately, cause side effects to another. On your top 100 drug list, insulin. They tell me what slides I have to do for some of these things, right? So it's okay. That's part one. So that's basic review of insulin, stuff you probably already know, but it's just a good reminder. What questions do you have so far? Before we get into my favorite section, which is visualizing insulin over time. I'm a picture person. I like seeing things. So this is how I envision insulin every day on my practice side. I hope that it helps y'all as well. Ooh, okay. So imagine that the bottom line is 24 hours. So 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., midnight. And the left side is insulin levels in the body, right? So at baseline, even if you're not eating anything, you're not doing anything, you're not consuming anything, there's going to be a baseline amount of insulin that's in the body, right? So that's your baseline insulin production. And why is that there? What is it doing?
Keeping you stable.
It's keeping you stable, good, right? Because, even if you're not eating something, your body's still using glucose, right? You got glucose stored in the liver. Your body can convert fat into sugar. So your body's still burning sugar, right? And it still needs to produce a little bit of insulin to make sure that sugar goes where it needs to go and everything. So you always have a baseline amount of insulin that's in the body. Then when you eat, your body says, oh man, I'm eating a meal, I better increase my insulin production for this meal. So when you eat breakfast, you have a big surge in your mealtime insulin production. Then again, when you eat lunch, and when you eat dinner. Now I know right now you're in college, so it may look like breakfast, snack. That's fine, right? We'll just get a bunch of little peaks. When we do it this way for simplicity. Now, if we were to check our sugars throughout the day, a few things to note. We have at the very beginning of the day, we have the fasting glucose, right? So why do I call it the fasting glucose?
Since you haven't consumed anything.
I haven't consumed anything, great. So, and then later on, I have my postprandial glucose. You know what I was written wrong, sorry. Fasting glucose, what's controlling the fasting glucose? Is it the mealtime insulin or the baseline insulin production?
The baseline.
Excellent, right? Because obviously how the mealtime have any effect? It's like not happened yet. So the baseline insulin levels control the fasting glucose. Now, after meals, you have what we call the postprandial glucose, and that'd be, after breakfast, after lunch, or after dinner. And what's going to control the postprandial glucose?
Your meal.
The meal time. Well, yeah, what you eat and then how much insulin you produce. Great. The mealtime insulin levels and, of course, the meals themselves. Now, keep this picture in your mind because we're going to come back to it. But I'm also going to turn this square shape into a circle shape because I like shapes. Still same 24-hour cycle, right? But now I'm trying to make it more of a cycle. So 6 a.m. noon, 6 p.m. midnight. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime. If you have kids, you will know that breakfast is often at 6 a.m. Like I do. Now, there's a point to this. Now we know that the common A1C goal is to be less than 7%, right?
Right.
Good. Now that means that we want the average sugar levels in the blood over a 24-hour period to be about 154 milligrams per deciliter. Now it doesn't make sense to target 154 all day because obviously the sugars are going to go up, the sugars are going to go down, right? So in the morning, we want the sugars to be a little bit below our goal of 154. In fact, it makes sense that if you haven't eaten anything, we probably want the fasting sugar in the morning to be about 80 to 130, okay? And as we move around the day, when we get into our meals, after we eat, it's okay for the sugars to be a bit higher. I'm okay with the sugars being up to about less than 180 after meals, because if I'm about 130 in the morning, 120, 130, 170 or 180 after meals, then what's my average sugar over the day? Probably about 154, which is an A1C goal of less than 7%. And so that's what the ADA guidelines recommend for target sugars throughout the day. And this is what is important when we're adjusting insulin or helping somebody control their diabetes is, hey, how close are you to these numbers? If, you're checking your sugars in the morning when you wake up, if they're 120, great, that's exactly where you want them to be. If they're 300 in the morning, we have a problem, right? So it's important to know not only what the numbers are, but the theory behind the numbers is that it gets us close to our average sugar for an A1C of 7. Now, if you had to check your sugar once a day, what is the best time to check it?
You said check it once a day?
Yeah, if you could only check it once a day, when would you want to check?
1 in the morning.
Okay, why?
Because we know the best number.
Okay, good. So
Before you
before,
go, yeah.
but why before meals? Wouldn't it be better to check at the end of the day, so after you ate all the food?
No, because you already know what you're going to eat.
It's gonna fluctuate depending on
Right,
what.
so it's going to fluctuate depending on what you eat, right? So if you wanted just a very clean number, hey, what's kind of my personal baseline before I go exercise, before I go eat anything, before I get stressed about something? before breakfast is gonna kind of tell you that patient's baseline, right? And for a lot of patients, when you gotta prick your finger, guess what? It hurts. And how long do you have diabetes for? Forever, right? So if you prick your finger twice a day for like 30 years, your fingers are gonna hurt and you're not gonna wanna prick them anymore, right? So I tell a lot of my patients, hey, if you don't wanna check every day, fine, check 2 or 3 days a week. And if you wanna check once a day, that's fine, check before breakfast. Because I wanna see where you're starting at the beginning of the day. That's the most important number for me to kind of track and follow if I'm working on their diabetes. And I'm trying to get it to that goal of 80 to 130. Now, the reason this is important too is, let's just say we have, let's just say this is Charlie, and we check Charlie's sugar in the morning and it's 160, right? So we would say that's about 30 points above his goal in the morning. Well, how's that going to affect him for the rest of the day? I think I heard it. What was it? It's going to stay at least 30 points higher for the rest of the day. Even if he does everything perfect, he had the perfect exercise, perfect diet, perfect everything. But guess what? His sugar after breakfast is going to be still 30 points high. And after lunch, it's going to still be 30 points high. And after dinner, it's going to be 30 points high. Because if you start high, you're going to stay high, right? And that's another reason it can target that morning sugar, because the way you start the day is how you're going to finish the day. If you start the sugar at 300s, you're going to end the day at least at 300, right? Because that's before you put any food in the body. If you start the day at 100, hey, well now you got some room. If you end the day at 150, at 130, at 180, you're still in goal. You know what I mean? And that's really where we want our patients to be. And so targeting that fasting sugar does us the favor of helping us kind of see what the patient is at baseline, but also you control the fasting and you're almost guaranteed to control them for the rest of the day in most cases. What questions do you have on that? Strategic pause. All right, we're good on time. Now, how can we improve our fasting glucose management? Now, remember what we talked about in the very first slide? We said that when you have diabetes, you have poor production of what?
Beta cell production.
We're good. Poor beta cell production of insulin, right? So let's just make that baseline insulin production go down. Oh no, we don't make as much insulin, right? So what can we do to help supplement that? Good, so we can give a basal insulin to supplement what the patient can't make on their own. So we're going to talk about basal insulins and prandial insulins in a little bit. But the idea of a basal insulin is to replicate this kind of insulin that's always being produced in the background, that the patient is having trouble keeping up with throughout the day. And really, this is not only going to help the patient's sugars, it can also kind of help take some of that pressure off the beta cells, right? Because now imagine instead of someone saying, hey, run, 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 now they're saying, hey, you can walk, I can carry the rest of it away. That's kind of what we're telling our body whenever we give it some insulin to say, hey, you don't have to make all that insulin. We got your back, we can help. And then the pancreas can go, oh, thanks. And we relax a little bit. So it can really be helpful to our patients' pancreatic beta cell function too when we give insulin, because now the beta cells don't have to work so hard. So, like we said, baseline insulin levels control the fasting glucose. So, therefore, if the fasting glucose values are elevated, you can fix it by increasing the basal insulin dose. And that is probably the number one tenet of my insulin management with my patients is I'm always looking at that fasting number. If that fasting number is too high, I'm adjusting the basal insulin. And in fact, I don't even start any other insulin until I get the fasting glucose control with the basal, right? Because there's no point in adding 5 injections per day if I just need 1 to control the fasting. Go for it.
So, you're like speaking about from experience and like what you do in your day-to-day job, like as a clinical pharmacist. But is this after like oral therapy?
Great question. You're 2 slides ahead of me. So I'm gonna skip this case and show you the answers. This is an insulin lecture, so I'm talking like everything's about insulin. But in addition to using basal insulin to control the fasting glucose, we can also use other diabetes medications that emphasize fasting glucose control. So that would generally be our glycolides, of which we have metformin in the United States, thiazolidinediones, of which we have Actos or pioglitazone, excellent, or SGLT2 inhibitors, which is I know those. My favorite class came out when I was in pharmacy school, and they really revolutionized treatment for a lot of our patients. So these also control fasting glucose, and I use the same tenets, like the same thing I'm talking about here with like, oh, I'm looking at the fasting sugars to adjust your insulin. I use the same approach with these oral medications. Hey, you're at 1,000 of metformin and your fastings are 150. That's too high. Let's go to 2,000 of metformin a day. Oh, your fastings are 140 and they're still too high. Let's add some jargons and see if that'll help. So I do the same thing with the orals. And I usually will try all of these orals before I go to insulin, right? Unless it's just really bad, like they come in with an A1C of 18. When my other resident here, he saw a patient with an A1C of 18 last week. Needless to say, we just put out all the stops, right? Take all this insulin here, you need help. But generally, I'm going to do the orals first because I like to treat patients the way I would want to be treated, right? Don't make me stick myself if I don't have to. If I can control it with the pill, let me take the pill, right? And then if the pills don't work or if that's not enough, that's okay. Well, I can then use some insulin. Great question, though. All right, you just saw the answer. That's okay. Patient case. So imagine we have a 36-year-old female. By the way, these are all real patients in my site. So if they seem kind of, you're like, why'd you come up with this hard case? It's just real life, you know what I mean? It's not always the case. 36-year-old female, A1C of 15%, 109 kilograms. Glucose log is fasting sugar is almost always too high, greater than 200. She said she's trying to lose weight, trying to cut her carbs. I'm like, that's good. On quite a few medications here, right? So she's on Levemir 65 twice a day, metformin, Jardiance, pioglitazone, and Titration. And you're thinking, okay, man, she's on all these things and her A1C is still 15%. Not great, but unfortunately is real life. So this means her average sugar is close to 390. Ouch, that's not great. She only recently started working on a diet, so we may see these diet, some improvements in her sugars after she sticks to her diet for a while, but she only recently started. And she's on a pretty aggressive diabetes regimen already. So what could you do for this patient? We have a few options. We could either increase the Actos to 30 milligrams, because she's on 15 right now. We could increase the Levemir to 75 units twice a day. We could refer her to a nutritionist to help with her diet. Or we could start some Novolog 10 units with dinner.
No to A, because they can cause weight gain.
Okay, good. So you mentioned that pioglitazone at high doses can cause weight gain, and that's an excellent point, right? She's trying to lose weight. I know that Actos can work the opposite direction, so maybe not the best choice for this patient. So very good. Someone else said diet. Hey, I agree. She's 109 kilograms. That's pretty overweight. I think she would benefit from learning how to maybe eat a little healthier. And I'll be honest, I love talking about nutrition, but nutrition can be really challenging when you work with an underserved population. A lot of my patients, and I notice inflation, and I'm not food insecure, right? So you take a food insecure population dealing with inflation, dealing with COVID and everything, and trying to talk to them about eating more fruits and vegetables, it's just not financially feasible for a lot of patients. So a lot of times my diet counseling goes down to like the easy stuff. Let's get rid of sugary drinks, sodas, sweet teas, and juices, right? Because that's not going to cost you money to not drink soda, right? And you save money by not drinking soda, right? I don't, if I had a different population, maybe I'd counsel them differently, but I try to focus on things that are feasible. But I agree with the nutritionist. What about these Levemir or Novolog options? Any thoughts on those? She was on 65 of Levemir right now, twice a day.
I mean, is she adherent? How long is she?
Let's just assume she's adherent. That's a good question though. Is she taking it? I don't know. You'll find a lot of times if anyone sees 15, it's because they don't take their meds. Let's just assume she's taking it. So a lot of great points. So I think that what we have to keep in mind is that her fastings are still what's really high, right? So maybe it's high at the end of the day. Maybe no log can help her sugars after meals. But ultimately, what's not in balance is that fasting at the beginning of the day. And the Novolog is really not going to help that morning number. By the time you take the Novolog at dinner and you go to bed and you sleep through the night, the Novolog is long gone, and now you're kind of back to where you were before. And so basically, the general strategy is to focus on fasting glucose first and then on the postprandial glucose. And you mentioned, hey, that's a lot of insulin. It is a lot of insulin, right? Now, is there a max dose on how much insulin you can use? Is there a max?
No.
Okay, so there's no hard max, right? It's basically you keep adjusting it based on the patient's needs. I think I have one patient who is on 360 units of insulin per day. That's the max I personally have. I could go up more if I needed to, but that's the amount she needs to control her sugars, right? And I have some patients who are on literally 3 units. I'm like, that shouldn't work, but it does. And they're like, oh, I'm good with 3, their sugars are great. And that's okay. There's a big range depending on how that patient's insulin resistance is, what their diet looks like. And so oftentimes you guys have to work with what you have, right? I can't add oral medications to this patient. She's already on all the orals, or almost all of them. So the best thing I can do is keep adjusting her insulin until I get that response I'm seeing.
I have a question. So, would it be possible to add Ozempic or something like that? Only if
No, that's a great point. Ozempic would be a great choice for this patient. It'll probably help with weight loss. It'll probably help her with her sugars. It just wasn't an answer choice. But it's a good option. I mean, she hasn't tried the GLP-1 yet.
I just
right?
see that she's on the Titration app, they interact.
Now, is there an interaction between Tradjenta and Ozempic, or DPP-4s and GLP-1s in general?
There is.
And what's the interaction?
That's sort of like a cascade effect,
Well, they'll cause an increase in GLP-1, but a GLP-1 agonist just bypasses your GLP-1s that activate the receptor anyway. So is there a clinical interaction? What's going to happen if you use both? That's my question. So the good news is, GLP-1 agonists are much stronger than DPP-4s. I think that using a DPP-4 inhibitor with a GLP-1 agonist is kind of like sticking a fan out the car to go faster. And technically, if you're blowing the fan backwards, it'll make your car go faster, but not really, right? By the time you use a GLP-1 agonist, you're just bypassing all of your endogenous GLP-1. So a DPP-4 really doesn't matter at that point. It's not harmful. It makes sense to stop it, but if you were to keep it on, it's not harmful, if that makes sense. Because sometimes I'll have a student and they'll be like, oh, I forgot to stop the Tradjenta. I'm like, oh, we'll stop it next time. Because it's not like the patient's going to get a bad reaction. There's no safety concern. It's just not going to really do much extra for them, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. There's a whole world of, I guess, interactions that we're like, oh, technically that's an interaction, but if it doesn't matter safety-wise, then it's like, okay, it's safe to use. I'm not going to worry about it. I once approved a Levemir 3 units 3 times a day. I'm like, that's not a normal Levemir dose. Levemir is a longer acting insulin. Usually it's dosed once or twice a day. So this person's dosing with meals. But I thought, is it a safety concern? No. 3 units 3 times a day. It's not going to hurt the patient. It's not going to cause low sugars. So I said, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? So that's you have to kind of use that when you think about interactions. So basal insulin, glycolides, thiazide, dials, SGLT2s, those are all of your best choices for fasting control. Also, telling patients, reminding patients to avoid late night snacking, that can also help. Because if you have ice cream at 11, I know you're fasting, but like, let's be real, that ice cream is gonna kind of make your sugar higher the next morning. It just will. And then a diabetes healthy diet, trying to tell patients to try one high carb food per meal. Technically, you can tell people to count their carbs and things. I think it's hard to count carbs, and I'm highly educated. So it's hard to imagine a patient, and many of my patients have an elementary school education or a middle school education. How do I expect them to have the time to count carbs amidst their busy day, or to be real comfortable doing that? So I say, hey, let's just try one high carbohydrate food per meal, right? If you're having, mashed potatoes and a roll and sweet tea with the meal, let's just try to have one of those. So instead of 3 high sugar foods, we're gonna have 1 high sugar food, right? So those can be different strategies to help patients without it being overwhelming mentally. We're gonna go into postprandial glucose now. What question? Any other questions on the last section? Cool. So now let's just say we get I can't remember. Charlie. Charlie was his name. Let's say Charlie's sugars are now 120 in the morning. We're like, yay, your fasting's look great. But we notice the A1C is still kind of high. We're thinking, oh, why is that A1C still high? Well, it must be because the sugars are high somewhere during the day, right? So usually once the fastings are controlled, I'm like, cool, that's good. If the A1C is also controlled, I'm done. Done my job, things are good. If the A1C is still kind of high, I think, okay, well, where are the sugars going high in the day? Now I can check a few different times to figure out where the sugars are going high at. Where do you think I should check?
After meal.
Midnight.
Dinner.
Okay, so after dinner, before dinner?
After.
Okay, good. Yeah, so some patients check before dinner and they're like, it looks great before dinner. But I'm like, I don't know what you had for dinner and how that affected it, right? So I have patients check at bedtime, as their next check, because it's going to capture any high sugars that was caused from breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's going to capture all of that in the bedtime reading. Now, that's okay if the bedtime reading is kind of higher than the morning, right? It could be as high as 180. But if it's, let's say it's 200 in the evening, or 210, or 220, then I know, okay, at some point in the day, their diet kind of got ahead of them, and that's what's causing their A1Cs to stay high. So if the fasting glucose is controlled and the bedtime glucose is uncontrolled, then postprandial glucose needs better management.
Question.
Go for it.
If they check after meal and they see is above the goal, what they do, what they should do?
So the question is, if they check their sugars after meal and they see it's a little too high, what should they do? We'll kind of get into that. Let me run to this next section and see if that answers your question.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to that. So one option to control the postprandial glucose is to simply use prandial insulin, right? So you could throw extra prandial insulin on top of what the body naturally makes at meals, and then you will improve your sugar control after you eat, right? So if postprandial glucose is elevated, you can increase the prandial insulin dose. Sometimes patients will say, well, do I check 2 hours after my meal or before the next meal? It's really about the same, because if you check 2 hours after breakfast or before lunch, is there really a big difference in time there? No. It's what's easier for the patient and for you. I usually tell my patients to check before their next meal because it's a little easier to remember, right? You're back at the dinner table or back at wherever you usually sit, you have your insulin with you at the time to when you're used to kind of doing those things. But it doesn't really matter. That's why I have that there. Now, prandial insulin is probably one of my least favorite options for postprandial control. Why? Okay, so patients can get hypoglycemia. There's that risk. But also it's just hard, right? I'm busy during the day. It's hard enough to inject a basal insulin every morning or every night. And now for a prandial, I gotta inject it with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which means I gotta pack my insulin, take it with me. If I work in construction or I work outside, I gotta keep it for not getting 120 degrees, you know, in the shade in Texas. It can just be really hard, right? And we have other options that also emphasize postprandial control, such as our secretagogues, sulfonylureas, or mandipamides, DPP4 inhibitors, or our GLP-1 agonists. GLP-1 agonists specifically have been shown to be as effective as prandial insulin in patients who are having postprandial elevations. So I like those for that reason, but you're still going to run across a lot of patients who are on Novolog, Humalog, other mealtime insulins. And it is appropriate for some patients, but I try other things before using them, if that makes sense. Other things that can help, small multiple meals throughout the day. So I had one patient who was Thanksgiving was coming up, and I said, okay, I want you to not eat every good thing at once. I just said, space it out. Eat something great, and then an hour or hour and a half a day later, eat something else. Like just do it like that throughout the day, so it's not all hitting your body at once. And he actually came back to me. He's like, doctor, it worked. Like my sugars are great all day, and I just ate all day because it was kind of spread out, right? When you overload the body at once, there's only so much the body can process at a time, right? And anything left over is going to spike the sugars. You spread things out, multiple small meals, the body can handle that a little bit more easily. And that's one reason why we recommend multiple small meals to patients with diabetes. Also, just eating better food, right? So if someone's having high sugars after breakfast, and it's because their breakfast was hash browns, orange juice, pancakes with syrup, oh, so good. That's great. Maybe they could have cut out the orange juice, or maybe had one pancake instead of a stack of pancakes, right? So those are other things that you can do too. Questions before we go to the patient case? Go for it.
Just one clarification. You said the GLP-1 agonists are as effective as the postprandial insulin?
Yes, there was I can't remember what year it was, but there's a decent meta-analysis that showed that patients, you know, if you compare patients on prandial insulin, like 3 times a day, versus patients who just get a GLP-1 once a day, that similar A1C reduction, they actually had better weight loss with the GLP-1 agonist, and everything else. So it's as effective for many patients. Probably going to help them eat less too, right? So you're not putting as much in the tank. So for the next patient case, a 46-year-old male, A1C 10.5%, oh, much better than a mass person. Fasting sugars are great, 110, but after dinner, it's like 300. Ooh, that's a little high. This patient actually has type 1 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is when it is appropriate to be on multiple injections, you know, all the time, right? So in this case, he's on Detamir 15 twice a day and Aspart 5 units with dinner. We have a few options we can do for him. What could you do? You could increase the Detamir from, you know, to 20 units twice a day. He's on 15 twice a day. So we can go from 15 twice a day to 20 twice a day. We can add some Aspart to breakfast and lunch. Say, hey, you know, let's add this to your other meals. You can increase the Aspart to 20 units with dinner, using 5. Or you can go to 7 units with dinner. All to help with that high 300 sugar level that you're doing. What do you want to do?
Hey.
All right. So the challenge with A is that it's going to affect your fasting glucose because Lavender is a long-lasting insulin. And remember, his fasting is 110. So if you use a basal insulin as a fasting to control, now he's going to wake up. It's going to be 80. It's going to be 90, maybe 70. Oh, I hit the wrong number, right? So my long-lasting insulins, my basal insulins, are fantastic. But because they affect the sugar throughout the whole day, once I get that fasting control, I can't really use it anymore. I can't really increase it further because then it's going to start getting too low in the morning. You know what I mean? That makes sense? So I'm limited. I probably can't increase the Lavender more than what I'm using. Now, we could add Aspart to breakfast and lunch. Probably needs it with having type 1 diabetes that they probably need Aspart with every meal. One thing I would want to do before that though is probably check his sugars around breakfast and lunch to see where they're actually at, so I can determine how much aspart I need, right? Because I don't want to just throw aspart at breakfast and maybe he only has, and some people don't even eat breakfast, right? And maybe he's only having a granola bar and I give him 5 units of aspart and he just gets horribly low, right? So I probably need some more information for that. So we can increase the aspart with dinner to either from 5 to 20 units or from 5 to 7 units.
5 to 7.
20.
20. Yeah, 20.
Yeah, 20 is too much. So 400% increase, a little overboard. And remember, with our type 2 diabetes patients, they have more insulin resistance. They're generally going to be on higher insulin doses. Type 1 diabetes patients are much more sensitive, so they're going to be on much lower insulin doses usually, and they'll respond a lot better to small changes in insulin. Which can kind of be a little shocking at first because you're so used to with your type 2 patients, you're like, oh, like 20 didn't work, let's go to 25, let's go to 30. Whereas with type 1, it's like, oh, let's go to 21, let's go to 22, because they're just a lot more sensitive to the insulin. So, like, you know, in this case, we can increase the aspart with dinner a little bit. That's a fine choice. Now, not all insulins fit cleanly as basal or prandial. Some of them are intermediate. And so this would be like insulin in pH, or Novolin in, Humanin in. Levemir actually kind of works in many ways like an intermediate insulin as well. And basically, intermediate insulins usually last about 12-ish hours, and they're kind of best of both worlds, right? So you get some activity that kind of looks like basal activity, but you get some low peaks in there that kind of stimulates a prandial insulin. So the nice thing about intermediate insulins is that they offer both fasting and postprandial glucose control with fewer injections, right? So you can take 2 injections of this per day and kind of get a similar effect as using Novolog 3 times a day with the long-acting such as Lantus. And what's important to remember about intermediate insulins is that the insulin you give in the morning controls your sugar throughout the day, and the insulin dose you give in the evening controls your sugar levels throughout the night. And that's what's nice is that you can adjust those 2 doses to better fit the patient. So for example, let's say I have a patient who's on insulin and pH, 10 units in the morning, 10 units in the evening. And they keep saying, oh, I keep waking up in the night, I have no sugars. Every night I wake up, I have no sugars. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I can keep that 10 units in the morning, and I can just lower the evening dose. Maybe use 5 at night. So 10 in the morning, 5 at night, and then I'm gonna fix the nighttime lows and not affect the day. So that's one of the nice things about these intermediate insulins that last about 12 hours. You can adjust the morning or the evening doses separately. That's pretty much it for this section. That was a lot of information. We're 15 minutes in. That's probably the most important section of what I had to teach you today. So I think a 5-minute break would probably be good to reset for our next section. But we can take questions during that break too. And if you need to get up, drink water, or whatever, feel free to do that. Very generically, in general, we did have a question in the last part of the lecture. What do patients do if they check their sugar after a meal and they find that it's high? One big problem I have in tackling, one other challenge with prandial insulin is that there's a lot of instant gratification with it. Like a patient will be like, oh, my sugars are 300. Let me give myself a little 5 units of this and watch it come down, right? And patients will kind of start adjusting their insulin based on how they're seeing their sugars and not how we're asking them to take their insulin. And that can sometimes be counterproductive. So that's actually another reason why I kind of stay away from the prandials as often, because patients will be like, well, no, it works really well, it lowers my sugar. But I'm like, but your A1C's 11, like, it's not working consistently, and I need you to do something that's like more consistent day to day versus like, oh, sometimes I give myself 10 units, or oh, I had ice cream, so I gave myself 15, or oh, it was like I checked in, it was kind of low, so I didn't give it this time. That doesn't work for diabetes. kind of taking insulin as you feel or as you may need it usually will not help you very much. But patients kind of can get used to that with the prandial insulins, like they check their sugars after meals and kind of adjust as they go. So that's another reason why I stay away from those. I say just check your sugar in the morning, take your basal insulin, and we're just gonna go from there. So that they're not trying to change it throughout the day, you know what I mean? Because if you start chasing numbers, you're gonna kind of run into trouble. So I hope that helps you answer your question. Next section is compare and contrast specific insulin medications. So there's a lot of different types of insulin out there. And we're gonna try to walk through each one kind of generally. I'll tell you a few caveats for each type. And a few things you should think about with any insulin is what is the insulin type? Is it a rapid acting insulin, an intermediate, or is it a long lasting insulin? The rapid acting is going to be more prandial, intermediate, halfway, and the long lasting is more of a basal type. Is the formulation, is it a vial and syringe formulation, or is it a pen injector, right? Pen injectors will often be more expensive, but patients prefer them. Whereas a vial and syringe, maybe, you have some patients who've been on it forever, and they're like, I don't want anything different, give me my vial, give me my syringes, cool, Concentration, insulin concentrations are traditionally 100 units per mil, but newer formulations can be up to 200, 300, 500 units per mil. Higher concentrations can change the activity of insulin, which we'll talk about a little bit. But it also can improve the comfort, especially in patients on high dose insulin, right? So, like I said, I had that patient who was on 360 units per day. If that was on a normal insulin of 100 units per mil, that'd be 3.6 milliliters of fluid. That's not going to really work. You're going to have all these bubbles under your skin. So I had that patient on a 500 unit per mil concentration, so she has to inject less fluid. Size, most pens are 3 milliliters. I say most, not all, but most of them are 3 milliliters. And most vials are 10 milliliters. There's a few exceptions. Some are 20 mils, I know. But usually those are the sizes. That's important from a dispensing or prescribing standpoint, because if I'm prescribing insulin under my collaborative practice, I need to make sure I prescribe a high enough quantity in milliliters for the patient. Or if you're dispensing, you gotta say, oh, they said 72 mils, well that ends up being like 7 vials or so many pens, right, depending on how much fluid is in each of those. And then also you have to be aware of the maximum dose per injection. Most syringes, syringes come in different sizes, but the biggest syringe will usually hold 1 mil or 100 units of insulin. Most pens will max out at 80 units on the pen. That's not all, but most, right? So if I'm trying to tell somebody to take 105 units of insulin, they usually can't give it all at once. They gotta take either 50 or 55 or 105, something like that. If we kind of line up our different insulin formulations, we can kind of put them on a scale here. Where on the left side we have our shorter acting insulin, such as Aspart, Glucine, Lispro, and regular insulin. And then as we come to the right, we get slightly longer lasting insulin FDH, insulin RD500, Levemir, Glargine, Degludec, and Icodec, which is included for fun. It's not approved, so don't worry about that one. But this is kind of how we're going to walk through these. So insulin Lispro and insulin Glucine. I put here kind of what the general formulations are available. These are both available as vials and pens. And like we talked about, what's important to note is the concentration and the amount, right? So if you have 100 units per mil and 10 mils, then how many units is that? 1,000, excellent. 1,000 units in a vial. So if you're, once again, prescribing or dispensing, and you're trying to figure out how many vials a patient needs, oh, they're taking 50 per day, okay, well 1,000 was 20 days of 50 per day, right? So I kind of had an idea of my day supply from there. The pen is going to hold 100 times 3 or 300 units per pen. For our fast-acting Lispro, the brand name is Humalog. I don't know why the ending is log. I can't think of any clever way, except I think of Frogger. Y'all play Frogger as a kid? You gotta hop on the logs fast, so I think fast-acting. That's like super stretching it, I know. But it's what we all do, right? It's what we're doing. There's no rhyme or reason. This is a prandial insulin or a mealtime insulin for two reasons. One, it's working very fast, right? Its onset is in 10 to 15 minutes, and it's not there for very long. It's only around for 3 to 4 hours. So you take it, and you better make sure you got food in your system, otherwise you're gonna get hypoglycemia. Now, on all the counseling stuff, it's gonna say take it 10 to 15 minutes before you eat. But how many of you like to cook?
I don't like to.
Okay, how many of you cook? Hey, a lot of cooks in here. How many times do you say, hey, dinner's gonna be ready in 5 minutes, and it's not ready in 5 minutes? Right, all the time. And even if it is ready, then you're like, oh, I gotta let it cool off, I gotta set the table, my dog wants to go out, like you may not be eating right when you expect to eat. And so sometimes patients, they can take their insulin, they think they're gonna eat, and oh no, the fire alarm went off. Or oh no, the mac and cheese is undercooked. It's not al dente, whatever. I know, that's silly. But if that's the case, they're gonna get hypoglycemic because they haven't eaten. So I will tell all my patients, go ahead and inject when you're at the table, when you have the food in front of you and you're actually either eating it or about to eat it. That way there's not this risk of hypoglycemia from taking it and not actually eating when you expect to. That's less of a concern for the long-lasting insulins, but for these mealtime insulins, that's a big concern. Aspart got its own slide because technically there's two formulations. There's the Novo Log version, and there's a slightly fast-acting version called Fiasp. Is there really any clinical benefit to an insulin working 5 minutes faster? Probably not. But it's great marketing, right? We're the fastest insulin. They get commercials on it and everything. Know that it's out there, but is it really better? Is it worth the cost? No. I mean, Novolog is just fine. You know what I mean? An extra 5 minutes isn't really going to make a big difference. Novolog. Now, our next insulin is regular insulin. Basically, it's unmodified human insulin. And so this comes in two formulations. It's Humalin R and Novolin R. R is for regular, right? I didn't really figure that out until I left residency. So I'm going to just tell you what it took me like 5 years to figure out. R is for regular. And the challenge is, like, the way you see this on a prescription in the computer is never how the patient sees it, right? Like, in the computer, I see insulin regular, and the patient sees Novolin R, right? So it can be sometimes challenging to speak the same language because all the different names go around, right? Like insulin NPH, no patient calls it that. They just call it their Novolin N or their insulin N. And so we kind of have to get used to the interchanging the names. Also coming in pretty standard formulations, is available over the counter at Walmart, which is good to be aware of. Onset is slightly slower, 15 to 30 minutes, and duration slightly longer. So it's not as clean. We don't really use this one as often for mealtime control because you're going to get a little bit more hypoglycemia because it's lasting in the body a lot longer than your Novolog or your Humalog, the Aspart or this one. But it's around and it's a little cheaper, so it's good for some patients. Questions?
Wait, say the ending part just one more time. You said it.
It's been around for longer, so it's cheaper, and it's going to be more accessible to some patients than Lispro or Aspart.
No, the part about hypoglycemia.
Oh, notice here that on Aspart, the duration is 3 to 5 hours, whereas for regular insulin, the duration is 4 to 12. So you have a lot more tail activity over here. So maybe you use it for dinner and then you went to bed and that insulin is still kind of working in the body when you don't want it to. You can get more hypoglycemia that way. Whereas the fast-acting insulin, the rapid insulins, they're gone. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about it anymore. Then we go to our intermediate insulin, NPH, which comes in, once again, two formulations, Novolin N and Humulin N. I don't know who was in charge of naming these or why they all sound the same. It's not very helpful. But N stands for
Neutral.
NPH, yeah, NPH. So that's how you can remember that. Also available generic at Walmart. And could you use this as a prandial insulin? Like would you really take this like right before a meal? Not really, because look at the onset, it's 1 to 2 hours, right? So I really consider NPH to be more of a basal insulin, because if you think about the onset, 30 to 15 to 30 minutes, it's gonna start working pretty fast for regular insulin. NPH is not gonna start working for a few hours, and once it starts working, it's gonna stay in the body a long time. So it's really acting kind of more like a basal insulin with a peak. Another thing to look at here is on the left side, you have the glucose infusion rate. Whenever they test these insulins, basically what they do is they give a patient insulin, and they also have an IV of glucose, because obviously the insulin's going to make you hypoglycemic, right? So they see how fast I had to give this person sugar to keep their glucose levels normal. That's kind of a way of seeing how fast the insulin is working. And you can notice here for regular insulin, the GIR, or how much glucose you have to give to accommodate that insulin, is pretty high. I mean, that's telling you that the insulin activity is pretty high, right? It's peaking at around 7 here. So it's a big peak that's happening here, whereas with NPH, it's a slow peak, but it's also a lower peak. The GIR is only about 2. And you'll find out with as we go to the other basal insulins, the GIRs are 2, 1, 0, whereas with the rapid insulins, the GIR is here 7. That's not the GIR. But anyway, the GIRs are much higher for a fast-acting insulin. This is really better representing the mealtime control, and this is better representing the basal production. That makes sense? You don't need to memorize GIRs, it's just kind of illustrate the differences, because sometimes they can seem like they're so similar. They're right next to each other on the chart, right? Regular and NPH, but you can kind of see they're rather different in that regard. So, similar name alert. So remember that rapid is Humalog or Novolog, short is Humulin R for regular or Novolin R, and intermediate is N for NPH. Maybe a good exam question if I want to stump you into which was good. Hey, I'm glad you're here, right? So and it's multiple colors. That means it's important, right? Now we get to Levemir. Levemir is a very unique insulin. Oftentimes it's considered a long-lasting insulin. But what's interesting about it is it actually has dose-dependent duration. And so what I mean by that, because of the medicinal chemistry of Levemir, the higher doses you give, the longer it lasts. So if you give a very low dose, let's just say you have a 100 kilogram person, so 0.1 units per kg or 10 units of insulin, it's actually going to last only a short amount of time. Here it says about 6 hours. If you give 0.2 units per kg or 20 units, it's going to last longer, about 12 hours. That's the intermediate dose. And it's only when you get to about 0.4 units per kg do you actually see a 24-hour duration of action with Levemir. A lot of people don't realize this, and it's one reason why Levemir, you'll see it sometimes dosed once a day. I can give it, maybe 40 units once a day, that's fine. Or it may be sometimes more appropriate to give 20 units twice a day, 20 in the morning, 20 in the evening, because the lower dose isn't going to last as long. It's kind of acting more like NPH, if that makes sense. What you'll also notice in this graph here is that, here's that GIR again on the left. Low doses will generally have low GIRs, kind of like NPH, but if you get to really high doses of 0.8 units per kilogram or 1.6, you can actually get pretty high GIRs as well. So I actually like Levemir a lot because depending on, I can kind of use it multiple ways. Someone says, I want once daily insulin. Okay, let me give you one big dose in the morning. It's going to kind of peak in the afternoon after you've had lunch, but it's still going to stay in your body like all the way through the night. Like that's kind of nice. I can also give a small dose in the morning to control the day, and a small dose in the evening to control the night. I can kind of use it like that. It kind of offers some flexibility that some of the other insulins don't offer, and that's why you'll see so many different ways this is dosed, and they're almost all right, because you can use multiple small doses or a few big doses, if that makes sense. If you ever need this paper on rotations, I have a reference down here. Like I said, a lot of people aren't aware of this, a lot of primary care providers aren't aware of it, so it can be helpful to know this. Then we get to Glargine. Glargine is unique in that it was the first peakless insulin. So if you go back to Levemir, you can obviously there are definitely some peaks here, right, when you give this. Glargine has no peak, none at all, right? So it's just going to stay flat. The GIR is staying, about at 1 the whole time. That offers some advantages and disadvantages. What do you think would be an advantage of having no peaks? I couldn't hear whatever you just said.
Consistent.
Okay, so there's a consistency, right? What's nice is that this is like the purest replication of basal or baseline insulin production you can get. I mean, it's only affecting kind of that baseline value, right? Because there's no peaks, right? It's not going to have any type of postprandial activity stimulation. So in that sense, it can cause a little bit less hypoglycemia. It's a bit cleaner. On the other hand, because it doesn't have any peak activity, it's only going to affect that fasting sugar. And now with insulin NPH, there is kind of a peak here. So if they're saying, oh, like my sugars in the afternoon are a bit high, well, I can get a little bit more in the morning, get more of a peak in the afternoon to control that. I can kind of do that with NPH. Same thing with Levemir. I can kind of use a bigger dose in the morning to control the day, a smaller dose at night. That kind of goes away with Glargine. I mean, it's nice because it's only once a day, it's 24 hours, but on the other hand, it's only going to control the morning sugar. And so it's useful for a lot of patients, but there's a big difference. You can see how this works with no peak versus Levemir that does have or NPH that do have a peak. And those three are the most common basal insulins you're going to see. It's NPH, Levemir, and Glargine, which is why I want to highlight the differences here. Glargine does come in a few different formulations, including a higher concentrated formulation such as 2JO. So that can be nice for a patient who needs a lot of insulin. I have some patients who are on, they get to where they're trying to use 100 units twice a day, and that can just ends up being a lot of liquid, right? And they got to go through multiple pens. I switch them to 2JO, and at 300 units per mil, each pen will last longer. They're not having to inject so many times, etc. Thoughts? Fortunately, there's not very many incidents, so we're almost done. Next one is Tresiba, or Degludec, which is really the newest formulation. It's considered ultra long lasting because it has a duration of 42 hours. So basically, it covers you today and tomorrow. What's nice about that is that with Levemir or all the other ones, you kind of have to take them the same time every day. Oh, you take it in the morning, take it every morning. You take it at night, take it every night. With Tresiba, or I should say Degludec, it works so long that you can actually kind of take it any time of day. Maybe take it Monday in the morning, and Tuesday in the middle of the day, Wednesday at lunch. Because you're always kind of working off of yesterday's dose. When you give today's dose, it doesn't really matter because today's dose is really affecting tomorrow. You know what I mean? And so that can be kind of nice for your forgetful patient who's busy and says, oh, I can't remember to take it at the same time every day, but I know I can take it sometime today. It can help with that person. Because it is so long lasting though, it can take a while to accumulate to steady state. So you want to be sure you give a few days to kind of see how it works before you change the dose again. I don't have access to this one much because it's just not on our formulary and with the county system. But I have a few patients with private insurance on it, and they like it. It seems to work well.
Is it expensive?
Oh yeah, all of these are expensive. But I will say, and it's hard. I mean, being in Texas is tough because we have the highest rate of uninsured, the highest uninsured population of all the states. Oklahoma beat us, and that's not great. No offense if you're from Oklahoma, but you know, it's challenging because you know we have the county system, which will catch a lot of people. You have Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP that will catch a lot of people, but a lot of people end up not getting caught somewhere, right? And so they don't have access to a lot of these great diabetes medications that we're talking about. And even over-the-counter insulin still can cost quite a bit per vial. So there's definitely a cost challenge with all of these drugs, which is unfortunate. There's several organizations in Harris County that can help provide diabetes medications to patients who don't have insurance or other forms of care. But it's challenging. It's also challenging to patients who don't live in Harris County and maybe live in a county without the resources, right? Because we're so fortunate to live in a huge county with all these options, and you know, you're not going to get that maybe in West Texas or East Texas or something like that. A unique insulin that probably deserves special attention is regular U500. How many of you have seen that in your pharmacy? A few people. So U500 is interesting because it's actually just regular insulin. They didn't change the insulin at all. But what they did was they packed a whole lot of insulin together. So instead of usually insulin, like we said, is 100 units per mil, now in this case they made it 500 units per mil, and so it's 5 times as concentrated. And it affects the kinetics in that if we go back to regular insulin, let me just dive backwards here. Notice that here, you know, the GIR is, once again, pretty high, 7, but it's peaking at about 3 hours, maybe lasting about 6, 7-ish hours, right? When you concentrate it and give it, think about when you're in an elevator and it's so crowded and you can't all get out at once. You gotta take your turn and get out the door, right? Because there's so many insulin molecules packed together, it takes longer for them to leave where you inject, and so it makes the duration much longer of the insulin. So instead of lasting just 7 hours, it's lasting closer to 16, 20 hours, and instead of peaking at 3 hours, it's peaking at 6 hours. It's actually causing an even higher GIR than regular insulin. And so the benefits of this is that it's really useful for overcoming severe insulin resistance. Oftentimes what this really means is that you have some people who they're just on super high doses of insulin. They think, okay, they're on 100 twice a day. Why is this not working? Why are their sugars so high? And it's probably because in those people, they need high insulin levels as like from a prandial insulin, but they just need that all day, right? And I can't really give somebody Novolog 18 times a day because that's just not gonna work, right? To get the insulin levels so high. But we also know that if they're doing like NPH or something, it just doesn't get those high GIRs. So this is one way of getting GIRs of, 4, 5, 6, 7 for a prolonged period of time that can actually finally get those insulin receptors to open up, to get those sugars out of the bloodstream. And it can really work well for patients who need more than 200 units per day. In fact, it's only FDA approved if you're already on that much insulin. But it's definitely a great option for those patients. It's more comfortable because they're not having to inject as much fluid, like I mentioned. Big counseling point is that because it is a more concentrated insulin, if you use your own supplies, you can overdose, and that's bad, right? Because if you use a U100 syringe, and it says, oh, it's 100 units. Well, now I'm using a more concentrated insulin, that actually means 500 units, right? So that's bad. So how can we prevent overdoses as patients switch to U500? Good, you gotta use the green syringe, good. So, it's written on the side, so not too hard. But the cap on the U500 is green, and the syringes are also green. And so, I always tell patients, green cap, green syringe, I'll tell them to get rid of their old syringes so that they don't make a mistake or mix it up. But I really worry about this. I spend like 5 minutes telling them, green, 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 green. They're like, I get it. I'm like, okay, good, because I don't want them to make a mistake. If you're, if you're in a pharmacy dispensing this, you need to make sure you do the same counseling. Make sure that you're giving the green U500 syringe with U500 insulin, so they're getting the right products together, so they know how to use it. You'll also, you can't really read it, it's too small up here, but this syringe goes all the way up to 250 units, which is a lot more than a normal syringe. That's another sign that it's the right one. And then just for fun, insulin Icodec was an efficacious once weekly insulin. It works, so, but it's just super long lasting, so you only have to take it once per week. It's probably gonna be, once it gets approved, assuming it gets approved in a few years, it'll probably be really helpful for those patients who are already controlled and who just don't want to poke themselves as much. I don't think it'll be a great game changer, because what you'll find with medications is that people who won't take their medications once a day probably are not going to take it once a week. So it's not going to really help the patients who don't want to be helped. But the patients who take it every day and are ready for it, if I can switch into a once a week one day, hey, that's going to be pretty cool. And so they're definitely moving the needle on these insulin formulations, lowering the barriers to using insulin, because let's face it, not everybody wants to poke every day, and that's kind of hard. So that's just something to be aware of. So when it comes out, you're back. I knew about that. It was coming. Questions on that section before we dive into some patient cases and call it a day?
It's more, I have a question. It's more like, the only time I really seen like the U500 insulin is like they have an insulin pump. So how would that really work? Like,
So insulin pumps, so I'm familiar with insulin pumps, but I'm not super familiar, because usually that's managed by endocrinology, so it's not something that I already manage. But the way an insulin pump works, it's usually used for patients with type 1 diabetes, and you'll have different type of pump systems, but usually what pumps will do is they're gonna infuse a certain set amount of insulin over time, like a basal rate. So maybe it's like 0.5 units per hour or 1 unit per hour or something like that. And then whenever the patient's eating a meal, they can tell the pump, oh, based on this meal, I need 10 units, and they just dial it in. The pumps, it's usually on their hip. It has a little needle that's injected with the insulin subcutaneously, and they can kind of tell the pump to inject more, inject less. Some of the pumps can also detect low sugars and inject glucagon if the sugars get too low. So there's a lot of variation there. A wearable insulin pump is the standard of care for patients with type 1 diabetes, because it has the best outcomes. It's the best way to treat type 1 diabetes, because basically it's like a pancreas on your hip, right? It's just constantly giving insulin, steady state and boluses as you need it. The challenge is, like, for example, I have many patients with type 1 diabetes who, it's the insurance challenge, right? They don't have insurance, they're on the county system, and then it's hard to get the level of support and follow-up with an endocrinologist you need to actually maintain, to program a pump and everything. And so you'll still find lots of patients with type 1 diabetes who don't have financial access to a pump or the access to an endocrinologist to get a pump. And so you'll have those patients just on multiple insulin injections for them. But it is the standard of care. We had a professor at my pharmacy school who was type 1, and he was famous for getting down to his boxers and being like, hey, here's my insulin pump, let's talk about it. I won't do that. But it's something to be aware of, but usually those aren't necessarily, I guess they are. You can get prescribed the cartridges out of an outpatient pharmacy, but a lot of times it's done more from the endocrine office side of things. Good question.
Pumps only take one type of insulin. Does anyone know what insulin you use in pumps?
Yeah, that's a ton of
A regular one. And it'll base off of that. So you won't have to, the bleach won't have to input basal and bolus. It's always, they're gonna base it off of regular.
All right, well, let's dive into some patient cases. But before that, a few little things from the guidelines. So 2022 ADA guidelines say that injection insulin is indicated for any of the following. if the A1C is high despite multiple oral therapies. And I'll tell patients, I'll be like, hey, we've tried it all, like we tried all the pills, like we're probably gonna have to start insulin soon. They'll be like, no, I'm like, it's okay, because like it's either that or like you get horrible disease complications, right? And insulin's a better alternative. But you know, we try the orals first. To like someone else said earlier, like, don't we try orals? Yes, we always do. It's also maybe indicated in patients who just come in with high A1Cs greater than 10 or glucose greater than 300, or anybody with type 1 diabetes. But really this is a shared decision making. It's not like I'm just like, hey, you need insulin, take insulin. That's not gonna work. I gotta get patients to believe that they need insulin and that they're gonna benefit. So how can you help somebody to understand that they may benefit from insulin?
Just educated on the disease complications.
Excellent, good. So the most common reason people don't take their medications is they don't see the value in it, right? And diabetes is tough to treat because patients, they don't necessarily feel bad. They're like, oh, well, like nothing's gonna happen to me. Oh, I've had diabetes for 5 years, I've been fine. I've been having diabetes for 15 years, I've been fine. Most of the complications of diabetes don't occur unless you've had diabetes uncontrolled for, you know, a good 15, 20 years. And so it's hard to get patients to buy into the fact that like what they're doing now is gonna help them later because they just see the cost of doing it now, right? And the discomfort. So what I tell patients is like I say, hey, you know, diabetes and the high sugar levels in your blood can cause damage to the organs in your body. It can damage your eyes, maybe cause blindness, damage your kidneys, it's a kidney failure dialysis, increase your risk of heart attacks, increase your risk of stroke, cause numbness in the feet and lead to amputations in the feet. It can also cause dental problems. It can contribute to indigestion and other issues. In men, I'll point out that it can contribute to erectile dysfunction. Because hey, it's something they care about, right? I'm just trying to get their attention to say, hey, these are all the complications. Those are bad. The good news is we can avoid those complications if we lower your sugar, you know, through medications, diet, etc. Unfortunately, you know, you've been using these medications, these orals, and they're working. They're just not working well enough, and your sugars are still high. So I think it's time for us to go to another therapy that will help your sugars to avoid the complications, which is insulin, right? So I try to frame it as a positive thing that's going to help them to avoid the complications, because that's what it is. Some patients will still say, oh, well, I still don't want to do it, yada, yada, yada. And I'll say, okay, well, that's okay, but like, if you don't want to, just know that these are the consequences and that you may get kidney disease, you may get blindness, and if you're okay with that, like, I support you. But if you don't want to have those things, like, we're gonna need to, try this insulin. And, that is kind of a way of trying to put the onus on them to make a decision of, like, which path do they want to take? Do they want to take the path of no insulin, which their sugars stay high and they probably get these complications in the future? Or do they want to try the insulin and show that it can lower their sugar? And most patients try insulin, especially the newer formulations, the pens or once a day. They kind of realize it's not as scary. And the needles are like so small, you can't feel it when you inject. Like you really can't. Once you can kind of get patients kind of realize like, okay, this is okay and it's accepted, they're more likely to do it. I'll also tell patients it's normal to be on insulin. Insulin helps a lot of people to do it. Like lots of my patients are on insulin, so they don't think it's like a stigma thing. And the last strategy I'll use is I'll tell patients, I'll say, like 100 years ago, like, if you had diabetes, you would have just died, right? Like you were just like, oh, sorry, like we can't help you, we don't have anything. But today we have all these medications, we have these great insulins, you have access to these insulins. I think they're gonna help you be better. Let's take advantage of like the blessing that like are these medications, right? So those are all kind of different strategies to frame insulin as a positive thing and not a negative thing. Because a lot of people get scared of insulin. They see, oh, well, my grandma had insulin and she died, right? She probably died of her diseases, not because of the insulin, but people kind of make those associations. So we kind of have to work against that and the stigma. But those are just some strategies. If you rotate with me in 2 years, we'll get to do that more. I had three TSC students this year, it was fun. Go to the American Diabetes Association website, it's going to say 10 units per day or 0.1 to 0.2 units per kg per day. Let's just be honest. What's the average adult weight? Let's throw a weight out.
175.
Okay, 175, which is like, let's just say, was that like 80, 90 kilos? You're 90 kilos, 1.1 unit per kilogram per day is 9 units. Oh, that's about 10 units, right? Let's say you're 300 pounds. That's like 140 kilos. Well, 0.1 units per kg per day is 14 units, rounds to 10 units. For most adults, unless you're just like really, really at an extreme, your weight is gonna be, 10 units is gonna come close enough to 0.1 to 0.2 units per kg per day that don't overthink it. 10 units is the starting dose of insulin. It's usually a basal dose that you start at. I don't do all this fancy math, I just start at 10, right? Because your sugars are obviously high, and 10 is gonna be just fine. And then we adjust from there. We never start at 50, we don't start at 100, we just start at 10, even if the sugars are terrible, and then I'll bring them back in 2 weeks and I'll adjust it. I also work in increments of 5 units because I think it's easier. Man, prime numbers are weird. Like if someone's on like 13 units or 17 units, I just get weirded out by that. I'm like, I can't cut that in half. Like I don't know what to do with that. 23 units, like what? I just try to keep it simple. 15, 20, 25, 30. It just makes it easier for me. I think it makes it easier for the patient too. Because they're trying to look at the little numbers on there and it's like, you know what I mean? The guidelines will say the prandial dose is 4 units per meal or 10% of the basal dose. And usually 10% of the basal dose is more of what I use. Special populations, pediatrics tend to be more type 1 diabetes and more insulin sensitive, so use lower doses. And they'll also often need parental assistance to help them manage their medications. With the more elderly patients, they're more likely to get confused, so the more you can simplify it, the better. I don't need my 85-year-old patient on 6 insulin injections per day. Let's make it 1 or 2. That's going to be better. Going into patient cases, how much time do we have? 35, okay, we're good. So we have a 37-year-old female, A1C is 9.4%. Fasting glucose is kind of high, 170, 202. She reports being adherent to her medications. She does say only that she's eating 10 tortillas with every meal. She's also taking metformin, empagliflozin, pioglitazone, and levemir. So, average glucose is about 220, probably too high, based on the A1C. Fasting glucose is elevated. She's pretty much already using all the med classes for fasting glucose control. So she's on the biglide, SGLT2, thiazolidinone, and a basal insulin. Her insulin dose is high, kind of relative to her weight. So one way of kind of assessing how high an insulin dose is to compare it to their weight. She's about at 1 unit per kilogram, so that's considered kind of high dose insulin use. So we're not that it's wrong, it's okay to use it, but once you get to that point, you're kind of thinking, okay, like another 5 units probably is not going to be my ticket. Like, let me think about what else is contributing here. And now, if we just assume these are like standard, small corn tortillas, that's about 105 grams of carbohydrates from the tortillas with each meal. So how can we help this patient's sugars? Okay, so that's an option, right? So maybe decrease. Now, should I tell her to not eat any tortillas? Don't eat tortillas.
No.
Yeah, it's not going to work, right? Now, you're not going to change the way somebody eats and the way they've been eating for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? Like, I'm not going to get somebody who just, let's just say you love, I'm gonna say mashed potatoes. Man, I love mashed potatoes. And if you tell me you never have mashed potato ever again, I'm gonna be like, I don't like you, doctor. I'm gonna go find a new doctor, right? But is it reasonable to say, hey, maybe instead of 2 plates of mashed potatoes, to have maybe a half plate of mashed potatoes? That's reasonable, right? You still get the mashed potatoes, right? The thing about this, like a lot of patients are going to cook for their family, right? So let's say you have a household and they eat a lot of rice in the household. because rice is pretty ubiquitous across many cultures, just different versions of rice, right? If they cook rice for their household, you can't just get rice out of the whole household, right? Like other family members expect them to make rice, right? But what you can do is say, hey, maybe we can cut back on how much of the rice that you're consuming, because obviously if you're having a big bowl or multiple bowls, that's going to affect your sugar more than maybe a small bowl or half a bowl. You know what I mean? So quantity is important, and that's to avoid the extremes. I don't need to completely get rid of the foods you've been making forever. Make them, right? Just don't eat so much of it. And that's one reason why I like the one carbohydrate per meal approach. Because instead of thinking about, let's say if I have my wife's family is Hispanic, and oftentimes it's going to be, tortillas, rice, and beans, and like that's a high sugar food plus a high sugar food plus a high sugar food. Now I can try to be like, only eat a little bit of each of those, but even a little plus a little plus a little ends up being a lot. So I'll tell patients is, hey, maybe one meal you have rice, and another meal you have beans, and another meal you have tortillas. Now they might not do that, but it's a good idea. And it at least tells them that, hey, you can have all these foods, but you're less likely to eat a whole plate of just beans. You know what I mean? Or a whole plate of just rice. You're more likely to eat a little, that makes a lot. You know what I mean? Same thing, if I diner food, think about a hamburger, fries, a shake. Oh my gosh, it's so good. But it's a high sugar food, high sugar food, high sugar food. So hey, maybe have the fries. If you want to fries that meal, great. Take the bun off the burger, just have the burger, without the bun, and have a diet soda, right? So you still get a soda that's diet, still get your fries, and you have the good stuff on the burger, just not the bun. And now you cut from 3 high sugar foods down to 1. So those are good strategies to help that don't really impede on the patient's lifestyle. You know what I mean? And it's going to be very cultural specific based on the patients that you work with, right? So if I work with a Vietnamese population, I'm going to have different food recommendations compared to working with a Hispanic population or with a Cajun population, for example, right? Other options we have for this patient, let's see, she was on 70 daily, so we could increase the number to 80 units once a day. That would probably help with the fasting glucose. Should we start some aspart 10 units 3 times a day with meal?
What about C?
Probably not a great choice to start aspart because we're going from 2 injections a day to 5. That's a little overkill. Oftentimes when I start aspart, I'll just start it with 1 meal in a day, right? Because that's what's reasonable, right? Patients aren't going to suddenly go from 2 to 5. That's just really hard. C is a great choice, so a GLP-1 agonist. But once again, we're kind of focused on our fasting sugar, and GLP-1 agonists are really good for postprandial control. They will lower the fasting a little bit, but not as much. And if we adjust the food intake, we can kind of address one of the causes of the persistent hyperglycemia throughout the day. So I would probably say A or D. Now, could you do a GLP-1 agonist? I'm not against it by all means. These are just kind of different ways of thinking through this problem. Thoughts? Alrighty. Next patient case. We have a 64-year-old male, A1C of 10.3%, 102 kilos. His fastings are kind of all over the place. 95, 200, 300. Okay, every day is a little different. He has generally high fasting glucose, occasional nighttime hypoglycemia. He also has some renal dysfunction, which keeps him from being able to use something like metformin, Jardiance, things like that. He's only on one insulin, one medication. It's NPH 6 units twice a day. So the thing to point out here is look at that fasting sugar. It's sometimes high, sometimes low. And he's getting some hypoglycemia at night. It could be due to the NPH peaking after bedtime, especially if he uses it in the evening. Hypoglycemia is also more likely with renal dysfunction. So when you have renal dysfunction, the insulin hangs around a little bit longer because the insulin is somewhat cleared by the kidneys. And so you can get more hypoglycemia from that. So how are we going to help this patient? We could increase the insulin to 65 units twice a day. That's one option. What do you think about that option?
With his already current,
Like I said,
he's getting hypoglycemia.
yeah, he's already getting hypoglycemia, right? So if I give him more insulin at night, he's just going to get more hypoglycemia at night. So that's not maybe the best choice. So the next option is MPH 7050. In this case, I'm lowering the dose at night, so I'm going to kind of fix the nighttime hypoglycemia. But that just means he's still going to probably wake up in the 200s, 300s the next morning. So maybe, I mean, it's not really fixing the problem. It's kind of a tough patient, right?
I think it's C.
C is interesting. What's up with C? So if we switch to a longer lasting insulin, we can basically improve fasting glucose control while lowering your hypoglycemia risk. And basically, the longer you make the insulin, the longer lasting it is, the lower your odds of hypoglycemia because you're getting lower peaks, right? So an MPH is going to have a decent sized peak after you take it a few hours later. You switch to Levemir, it's a lower peak, a little bit longer lasting. You switch to Lantus, there's no peak and it's even longer lasting. And that's what the clinical trials have found. Tresiba has even less hypoglycemia than Lantus. And practically, I'll get a patient who's on insulin NPH, I'll adjust that NPH up, and as soon as they start getting low sugars at night, if they're fasting is uncontrolled, then I'll switch them to a longer insulin to kind of help fix that. So that's just one strategy you can use to fix nighttime hypoglycemia. Kinetic dose is not great because this patient has renal dysfunction. Now these are all teaching points. Do I expect you to have all this stuff memorized? No, it's about the theory. It's about kind of being thoughtful about it. And I'm just trying to give you kind of some real life examples. But it's all very nuanced. And one of the things that's interesting and fun about diabetes is that there's 100 right ways to fix a problem. I could have fixed his hypoglycemia by telling him to maybe eat a snack closer to bedtime. Maybe he's having dinner at 4 and going to bed at midnight, and he just hasn't eaten, right? So I can fix it that way. I could fix it by changing something else about his life. Or I can do this, right? So there's different right answers, and that's I think what makes it fun when you get to treat diabetes is that there's multiple right ways of doing things. All right, a few more minutes left. Now we have a young patient, 20-year-old female, A1C of 14.5. Very interesting. So check these sugars out. We have fasting 200, then in the afternoon 60, then before dinner it's 220, then in the middle of the night 70. She has type 1 diabetes on 2 types of insulin, glargine 70 units a day, and aspart 15 3 times a day. So because she gets this hypoglycemia in the middle of the afternoon, she has to eat a big snack to compensate. And same thing in the middle of the night. She wakes up, she's low, she's got to go get her soda or whatever to kind of bring it back up. And this is an interesting phenomenon in which hypoglycemia episodes are resulting in hyperglycemia after resolution. Basically, if you push the sugars too low, the patient has to respond, and their response is going to cause them to kind of rebound the other way. So how can we fix that? Well, we could increase her glargine to 80 units. Maybe not the best idea because she's already getting low sugars in there, right? So if I use more of a fasting or more of a basal insulin, it's going to worsen nighttime hypoglycemia. She's on 15 units of aspart with meals. I could lower that to 12. And would that be helpful, you think?
No.
Why not?
I mean, her sugars might actually go up.
Well,
It's just looking for fasting.
so the question is, why is her fasting and her pre-dinner high? It's high because of the lows and her response to the lows, right? So she's waking up in the middle of the night, she's having a big snack. In the middle of the afternoon, her sugars are crashing. She's trying to eat something to bring it back up. And then when you check a little bit later, it's high. Of course it's high because you had to wake up and eat cake or cookies in the middle of the night to bring your sugars, back up. So in this case, hypoglycemia is really the cause of the problem, and the reason why her sugars are getting high is in response. So sometimes if you back off the insulin to avoid the low sugars, it can kind of help things be more stable so that they're not going down and then, eating a snack and it flies back up, you know what I mean? It can kind of help with that. And that's something that you do see occasionally. That's one of the reasons why we want to avoid overdoing insulin, because of the low sugars can cause rebound hyperglycemia. You can also tell her to eat more carbs with each meal. Probably not a great long-term solution if she wants to stay within a normal weight and have normal insulin requirements. A bedtime snack can be helpful though if you dinner time several hours before bed. Thoughts there? Alright, we have one more case. 40-year-old patient, A1C 8%, fasting sugars 145, 150, 163, just a little bit too high. She's on insulin NPH twice a day, 20 units twice a day. She says, I don't like needles, I don't want to inject more than 1 time per day. So what can we do for her? She's on 20 twice a day. Okay, so we can give her a longer lasting one, right? So she's on, one thing to notice here, she's on 40 units total per day. And so if we go to a longer lasting insulin, we can change it to larging 40 units. Sounds maybe pretty reasonable, and it's kind of equivalent to the total daily dose she was taking before. So if you're switching from one insulin to another, especially trying to lower the amount of injections, always look at the total daily dose. I can also change the NPH 40 units. Do you think that's a good idea? Okay, I see you shaking your head no. Why is NPH 40 a bad idea?
You're giving it at 9?
I'm giving it at 9. I'm giving it all at 9, and it's an intermediate, so it's only lasting 12 hours. So I'm pushing 40 units overnight versus with Dorjin it's 40 units over 24 hours. So it's going to end up being some low sugars, and it's not going to really help her during the day. Tradjenta, do you think that's going to help? Well, it's only going to improve her postprandial control, 1. It's not going to help her fasting. But 2, it doesn't really address why she's upset, which is the fact that she's having to inject twice. So that's not really going to help. What about Degudec 80?
I think it's this one.
You said, you said it had to be like equal.
Yeah, it needs to be equal. So if we dramatically change her daily insulin dose, I mean, she was a little high, her sugars are a little high, but she's really close to her goal in the morning, right? So she doesn't need a big change to get to goal. I'm not going to double her insulin when she's that close. So the best answer is probably A. Now, this is a whole lot of information. I get it. You don't do this every day. I do this every day, like all day, right? So like I'm familiar with it. What I want you to focus on is don't focus so much on memorizing all this information. It's really not supposed to be like memorized jamming in your brain. It's supposed to be more reflective and like big picture concept, right? So think about, okay, is the insulin I have, is it a quick peak? Is it intermediate? Is it really long? And how is that going to affect the patient? How is that going to move through the blood and affect the patient? That's why I spend so much time on those pictures, because that's what I actually do every day. I just think, how's this insulin going to be? Is it, how's it going to act? Where is it here? Where is it not? So don't focus so much on the minutia, just focus on the big picture. And that's actually the best advice I ever got in pharmacy school. I had a professor say, stop focusing on, you gotta focus on the details, right? But she's like, just close your eyes, relax, and just reflect. And that really helped me a lot, because sometimes I just needed to like really just like reflect and not be so like staring at a screen. You know what I mean? It sometimes helps to kind of find that. And I will say a good rule of thumb is when in doubt, make things easy for the patient and simple. What would you want to do? Would you want to take insulin 6 times a day? Probably not. So if you're in a position where you can help manage someone's insulin, helping them to be, control their sugars on a once a day insulin or a twice a day insulin is probably a better choice than something that's really complicated. Same thing, 10 units 3 times a day versus, take 12 with breakfast and 13 with lunch and 15 with dinner. Oh, that's too complicated. Make it simple, right? Simple is better for everybody. That's what we do. I have my email on here, ryan.popp@harrishealth.org. As you study and you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I will get back to you with those. And I appreciate y'all's time today.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
I misspoke, I'm on the insulin pump, I said regular, I meant rapid.
I was gonna
Don't
ask about
confuse the R's, I do that all the time.
I was gonna ask about that,
Yes.
because I have someone that comes to our pharmacy, and he always gets a log.
Correct, that is correct, rapid is the correct R term.
Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll keep answering until.
Any areas of concentration?
What?
Any areas of concentration?
Areas of concentration for your exam. Well, I gave you one hint. Remember, multiple colors mean something important.
Pictures too, right?
I mean, I try to keep it conceptual. I'm not going to be like, how long does insulin leaven your last at this unit per day? That's a dumb question, right? It's more like, do you understand the concept of what I'm trying to communicate in the big picture, right? So if you know the big picture, I think you'll. That's as much as I can say. I can't remember my exam questions. I wrote them right here. I gotta go work on it again. Are you counting my exam?
Yeah, we're on the table.
Any other questions, thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, thank you so